In a small town in America, a young woman's life was shattered after a terrible accident. Doctors told her she would never walk again, and hope seemed lost forever. But sometimes, miracles come from the most unexpected places, not from hospitals or science labs, but from the hands of a small-town mechanic. This is a story of courage, determination, and a second chance at life. Let's get started. Emily was only 22 when life as she knew it came to a halt. She had been driving home from college on a rainy evening in Ohio when a truck lost control and hit her car head-on. The crash was brutal, and when she woke up in the hospital, her world had changed forever. Both her legs were badly injured, and despite multiple surgeries, doctors told her she might never walk again. At first, Emily thought it was just fear talking, that eventually she would recover, but each passing day brought the same bleak news. Her parents tried their best to stay strong, but inside, they were broken. Every visit to the hospital ended with the same hopeless expressions on the doctors' faces. Emily's mother cried silently at night, hiding her tears so her daughter wouldn't feel worse. Her father, usually the strong one, avoided eye contact whenever doctors gave updates. Emily was left in a wheelchair, staring at the walls of her hospital room, replaying the accident over and over in her mind. She couldn't believe that her dreams of traveling, working, and building a life had been stolen in a matter of seconds. The first few months after the accident were the hardest. Physical therapy sessions felt pointless because her legs showed no sign of strength. The therapists encouraged her, but even they began to lose enthusiasm. Friends who once filled her room with laughter stopped visiting as often. Emily felt abandoned, not only by her body, but also by the people she loved. The loneliness dug deeper into her heart than the pain in her legs. She stopped smiling, stopped believing, and convinced herself that the doctors were right. She would never walk again. Her room at home became a prison. Emily would spend hours staring out the window, watching other young people ride their bikes, jog, or simply walk freely without thinking twice. She remembered how she used to run through the campus, rushing late to class, and the memories cut deeper than any physical wound. Every night, before she went to sleep, she prayed for a miracle, but each morning she woke up to the same cruel reality. She began to withdraw from everyone, even her parents, because it hurt too much to see their eyes filled with pity. The medical bills piled up, draining the family's savings. Emily overheard conversations between her parents about selling their small farm just to keep up with the costs. That guilt ate her alive. She felt she had ruined not only her own life, but theirs as well. Why me? She would whisper into the darkness again and again, without ever receiving an answer. The world outside moved forward, but her life was frozen, stuck in a moment she could not escape. Hope seemed like a cruel joke that she no longer wanted to believe in. One particular evening, after another discouraging doctor's visit, Emily locked herself in her room. She stared at her legs and touched them as if trying to feel something, anything, but nothing responded. She broke down crying until she could barely breathe. Her mother knocked on the door, begging her to open it, but Emily just whispered through her sobs, "I'm broken. Mom, I'm not me anymore." Those words hung heavy in the air, and in that moment, even her mother had no comforting reply. The silence between them was almost as painful as the truth itself. Despite all this despair, a small part of Emily refused to let go. She started reading stories online of people who had beaten impossible odds, though she often doubted whether she could be one of them. Sometimes in the quiet hours of the night, she imagined herself standing again, feeling the ground beneath her feet. She imagined walking to the kitchen without help, stepping outside without wheels beneath her, maybe even dancing again one day. These dreams gave her a flicker of hope, but reality always rushed back in the morning, crushing those fragile sparks. Her father tried to distract her by taking her along whenever he had errands to run, even if it meant just sitting in the truck. He thought being outside might help her, but mostly she stayed quiet, watching people go about their normal lives. One day his old pickup broke down, and they ended up at a local repair shop. Emily sat in her wheelchair, waiting in the corner of the workshop, while her father talked to the mechanic. The smell of oil, the sound of tools clanging, and the sight of cars being fixed made her feel strangely alive, as if she were in a place where broken things could be made whole again. She didn't know it then, but that moment would change her life forever. The mechanic, Jake, glanced at her a few times as he worked on the truck. His eyes lingered not with pity, but with curiosity, as if he was already thinking of something beyond what everyone else had accepted. Emily couldn't have guessed that this simple visit to a small-town garage would soon become the turning point she'd been praying for. In a world where doctors had lost hope, destiny was quietly preparing to introduce her to someone who hadn't. Jake was unlike anyone Emily had ever met. He wasn't a doctor, not even an engineer, just a small-town mechanic who spent his days fixing broken engines and patching up old cars. Yet there was something different in his eyes when he looked at her. It wasn't pity or sadness. It was a spark of possibility. He saw her not as someone broken, but as someone waiting to be rebuilt. After her father explained Emily's condition, Jake grew quiet for a moment, wiping the grease off his hands. Machines break, people give up. But sometimes the answer is in building something new. Emily didn't pay much attention at first. She had heard enough promises, false hope, and kind words that led nowhere. But Jake kept asking her small questions. Do you still feel pressure on your legs? What's the hardest part? Balance or strength? These weren't the questions of a stranger making polite talk. He sounded like a man who was building a plan in his mind, one gear turning after another. Emily wanted to brush it off, but there was something about his voice, steady, confident, that made her curious, if only for a moment. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat in his workshop long after the lights had gone out in the town. He stared at the scattered parts lying across his workbench. Steel rods, discarded motors, springs from old suspensions, and wires that most people would call junk. But to Jake, these were possibilities. He sketched on an old notebook, drawing frames and joints, imagining how he could transfer the logic of fixing cars into giving a young woman the ability to walk. If a machine can carry the weight of a car, why can't one carry the weight of a human? He whispered to himself. Over the next few days, Emily's father kept returning to Jake's shop for truck repairs, and each time Jake would sneak a glance at Emily. She noticed his persistence and finally asked, "Why do you keep looking at me like you know something I don't?" Jake smiled and replied, "Because maybe I do." He then explained his idea, building a supportive walking device, like a frame powered by small motors, something she could strap onto her legs. Emily almost laughed. "You? A mechanic? Do you really think you can do what doctors couldn't?" But Jake didn't flinch. He simply said, "I fix what others give up on." At first, Emily resisted the idea. She was tired of disappointment, tired of being told to believe. But her father urged her to give Jake a chance. "He's not promising miracles," her father said gently. "He's promising effort. That's more than most people have given us." Slowly, curiosity won over fear, and Emily agreed to let Jake try. Jake began spending every spare hour in his garage, often working late into the night. Neighbors wondered why his shop lights never turned off. Inside, sparks flew from welding tools. Motors hummed on test benches, and Jake's hands moved with a determination that seemed almost otherworldly. His workshop became a place of creation. He tore apart old bicycles, salvaged motors from discarded machines, and repurposed hydraulic parts from trucks. With every trial he faced failure, joints that wouldn't hold, frames that bent under weight, circuits that overheated. But Jake never stopped. Each failure was just another step toward the right solution. Emily visited once or twice, watching from her wheelchair as he tested prototypes. She still didn't believe it would work, but deep down, seeing his relentless energy lit a spark she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, someone was fighting for her, not giving up. Weeks turned into months. Jake grew thinner, his hands rougher but his eyes sharper. He began piecing together something that resembled an exoskeleton, metal braces that would wrap around Emily's legs, supported by lightweight motors and powered by a simple battery pack. He built padded straps for comfort and added handles for balance. It wasn't pretty, nothing like the futuristic devices seen in medical labs, but it was strong, sturdy, and born of raw determination. To test it, Jake strapped the device onto himself first, walking awkwardly around the garage until he was satisfied it could hold weight. Emily's parents were nervous when Jake announced it was ready for her. "Are you sure this is safe?" her mother asked, worry etched into her face. Jake nodded. "I wouldn't put her in it if I wasn't sure." Emily, though terrified, agreed. She was tired of being trapped, tired of staring out the window while life passed by. If this was another failure, at least it was different from all the others. Jake gently lifted her legs into the frame, securing the straps around her thighs and calves. He tightened the buckles with steady hands, like a craftsman finishing his masterpiece. The moment of truth came, as Jake handed her the support handles. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. "Just lean forward a little," Jake instructed softly. "The frame will catch you." Her parents held their breath as she shifted her weight. The motors hummed faintly, and for the first time in 2 years, Emily felt her body respond. The frame locked in place, giving her the balance she had lost. She gasped, tears welling in her eyes. Slowly, shakily, with Jake holding her arms, she rose from her wheelchair. Her knees trembled, her hands shook, but she was standing. It wasn't perfect. Her legs didn't suddenly heal and walking wasn't easy. But standing, something doctors told her she would never do, was already a miracle. Emily's mother burst into tears, clutching her father's hand, as they watched their daughter rise against all odds. Emily looked at Jake, unable to speak, but her eyes said everything. In that garage filled with grease, tools, and broken machines, something extraordinary had happened. A mechanic had turned discarded parts into hope. For Emily, the journey was far from over, but for the first time, she believed maybe, just maybe, walking again wasn't impossible after all. The first step was the hardest. Emily's hands clung tightly to the handles as her body leaned forward. Jake steadied her, whispering calmly, "One step at a time." The exoskeleton frame responded, shifting weight from one leg to the other. Emily felt her foot touch the ground and press against it, something she hadn't experienced in 2 long years. Her parents gasped as tears streamed down their cheeks. For Emily, it felt surreal, like a dream she had begged for night after night. Shaky but determined, she took another step, and the small workshop filled with the sound of quiet miracles. Every movement was awkward, unsteady, but it was progress. Emily kept her eyes locked on Jake, who guided her patiently, never letting her stumble. She wanted to cry, but she was afraid that if she broke down, she'd lose her focus. Step after step, her confidence grew. The fear of falling gave way to a newfound belief. Her body was still weak, but the frame carried her where her legs could not. Her parents clapped through their tears, unable to contain their joy. Emily looked at them, smiling for the first time in years, whispering, "I'm walking, Mom." The moment spread quickly through the small town. Word traveled from neighbors to friends, from friends to local reporters. Soon, people began gathering at Jake's garage just to witness Emily's progress. At first, she was embarrassed by the attention, but soon she realized that her story wasn't just her own. She was inspiring others who had given up hope. People came with tears in their eyes, cheering her on, some even sharing their own struggles with health or loss. Emily's courage, paired with Jake's invention, had turned into a beacon of hope for everyone who felt trapped by life's circumstances. Jake, however, never sought the spotlight. Whenever reporters asked him how he had managed to build such a device, he shrugged humbly. "I just fixed something that was broken," he would say. But everyone knew it was more than that. He had taken the heart of a mechanic and combined it with the mind of an inventor, creating something that even medical professionals couldn't. Emily admired him deeply, not only for his skill, but for his compassion. He hadn't seen her as a patient or a burden. He had seen her as someone worth fighting for when no one else did. The local news eventually picked up the story, and soon national outlets were interested. Reporters from across the country came to Ohio to interview Emily and Jake. For Emily, it was overwhelming, but she embraced it. She wanted the world to know that hope doesn't always come from hospitals or high-tech labs. Sometimes it comes from a man in a grease-stained shirt, working late nights in a small-town garage. Her story was aired on television, and millions watched as she took her first steps. Messages poured in from across the country, from people who found courage in her journey. As attention grew, doctors who once told Emily she would never walk again began calling her family. Some were astonished, others skeptical. But Emily didn't care what they thought anymore. She knew what mattered. She was no longer trapped in her wheelchair. She could stand, she could move, and most importantly, she had her hope back. Jake continued to refine the device, making it lighter, stronger, and easier for her to use. He wanted it to be more than a prototype. He wanted it to change lives, and Emily was determined to help him share it with the world. Emily's parents couldn't stop thanking Jake. They often brought him home-cooked meals, worried he wasn't taking care of himself with all the late-night work. Jake would smile, brushing it off, but deep down he felt something he hadn't in years: purpose. Fixing cars was his trade, but helping Emily walk again had given his life meaning. For Emily, each new step she took was not just a victory over her paralysis, but a symbol of the human spirit's power to rise again. Together, they had rewritten a story everyone else had already decided was over. Months later, Emily walked across the stage at a community event held in her honor. The crowd erupted in cheers, many wiping away tears as they witnessed her walk independently with Jake's device. She paused, turned to look at her parents in the front row, and whispered, "We made it." Her mother covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed with joy, while her father stood proudly, clapping until his palms hurt. Emily's speech that night was simple but powerful. "They told me I'd never walk again. But thanks to someone who refused to give up on me, I'm standing here today." National organizations soon reached out to collaborate with Jake. Engineers and medical professionals wanted to study his design, improve it, and make it available to others. What began as a desperate attempt to help one girl became the foundation of something much bigger, a movement to give hope to thousands who had lost it. Jake was still the same humble mechanic, but now his work carried the weight of countless dreams. Emily stood beside him at every event, reminding everyone that miracles don't always come from science alone. Sometimes they come from heart, faith, and determination. For Emily, life was no longer confined to the four walls of her room. She traveled, met new people, and even returned to college to finish her degree. The girl who once stared out the window in despair was now walking into classrooms, walking into her future. Every step she took was a reminder of the night in a small Ohio garage when a mechanic dared to dream bigger than doctors. She still used the device, still needed its support, but in her heart she had already won the greatest battle, the battle against hopelessness. And that victory would last forever.